candidate of the Socialist Equality Party. I'm here again speaking with my running mate, Nerissa Santa Cruz. Hello, Nerissa.
Hi, Joe.
We'll be talking about the Democratic National Convention, which of course just wrapped up yesterday, the 4-day affair, which concluded with the nomination of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Just to introduce the discussion, I think it's worth stressing that this is an election which is being held under really extraordinary conditions. The death toll from the coronavirus pandemic is now nearly 180,000 people in the United States, 1,000 added to that horrific toll every day. Tens of millions of people are unemployed, been cut off from federal unemployment benefits, face evictions and poverty. And of course, the expanding pandemic, the Back to Work campaign, now the drive to reopen the schools, which will have horrific consequences. There is certainly immense popular hatred of the Trump administration, which is principally responsible for this catastrophe. And a lot of pressure, therefore, which is being brought to bear to insist that the only way to stop Trump is to support the Democratic Party. And of course, this is a theme which is being promoted in the media and from the Democratic Party and those around it incessantly. So we'll be speaking, though, about the convention and the outcome of it. I think one element, and Nerissa, I don't know how much you got to watch, but one element which was particularly striking to me was just the absolute inanity, that is the emptiness, the sort of cliches and empty rhetoric, which was expressed throughout the 4-day event. And then it culminated in the official acceptance by Biden last night, where he gave a speech about darkness into light and a new hope and everything else, that the election of Biden would really transform America, which is a pretty sort of rich statement. This is, after all, someone who has been in politics for nearly half a century, has a long record of supporting war, supporting the repeal of Glass-Steagall, supporting the Patriot Act and the expansion of police state spying measures, supporting attacks on homeowners and the ability of homeowners to declare bankruptcy, supporting more repressive police laws to lock more people up and throw them in jail. I mean, this is an incredibly right-wing figure who the Democratic Party has represented as supposedly the agent now of transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the major components of the whole DNC was the way in which, throughout the many days of the convention, it was really sort of a game show of all of the, political figures that should be, brought up against, crimes against humanity, brought for trial as warmongers. I mean, the promotion of, Kerry, rolling out of McCain's widow, Colin Powell. I mean, these figures, Hillary Clinton, are synonymous with U.S. imperialism. And there was the, lengthy address from Powell and his support for Biden. And I think it's just really important for, our viewers and supporters to note Colin Powell's background, the fact that he, was the chief architect of the war in Iraq. Cities such as, Fallujah and Haditha, as well as the crimes committed, Abu Ghraib, these are synonymous with the worst crimes of U.S. imperialism. And, Powell said that of Biden that, Biden will trust our intelligence agencies, that he'll stand up to our adversaries with strength and experience. They will know what we mean by business. And so, really, these are reassurances to the bourgeoisie, that the Biden-Harris ticket will really carry forward with the pursuits of U.S. imperialism, its war drive, its anti-Russia campaign, its war drive with Russia and China. And this is really what the Biden-Harris ticket represents. An open representation, appeal to the military, to the police state and intelligence agencies, and to fundamentally, Wall Street.
Yeah, I also thought the second day was really sort of, in sense, it's the essence of it, which was focused on foreign policy and Powell, as you mentioned. I mean, the World Socialist website and Socialist Equality Party has been explaining throughout the Trump administration that there are conflicts within the ruling class, but those are conflicts that have centered primarily on questions of foreign policy. And you had the Democrats' anti-Russia campaign, which they've utilized throughout the pressure of the Trump administration. Certain divisions over foreign policy, and a feeling that Trump hasn't really been pursuing those interests in the way that they want. For someone of my age, I mean, I became politicized right around the time, right before the Iraq War, and became active in socialist politics in the early 2000s. And no one can forget, first of all, the Iraq War itself, which was a horrific war crime, and particularly Powell's going up before the United Nations and holding up his anthrax vial and showing his supposed, the photographs and this and that of supposed weapons of mass destruction sites, which were all out and out lies, and they knew were lies, and he knew were lies, to justify a war that led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. And this is who the Democratic Party then really features as the principal endorser of Biden.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking on that too, I definitely was politicized during the administration of Obama, who, had run on the ticket of an anti-war ticket, had promised to end the wars of George W. But, like millions of other people in my generation, we'd come to see that essentially the same wars would not only be continued, but would be expanded into Libya and Syria. And I think that this is, it's the experience of the Obama administration, which had really paved the way to the election of Trump. And that's, that is not the line of the Democratic Party. They essentially blame, the working class, particularly the white working class, on Trump's election, but really take zero responsibilities for the fact that throughout the Obama administration, we saw the largest transfer of wealth from the working class, from the poor to the rich, the bank bailout, the restructuring of the auto industries, as well as just an entire social counter-revolution that unfolded, driving down the living standard and wages of the working class. So essentially the hope and change was really proved to be the continuous and even deepening policies of the Bush administration, included in that the mass deportation of over 3 million immigrants. And, that, I mean, the photo of Kamala Harris posing with ICE and police along the US border in so many ways really represents what the Biden-Harris ticket will carry forward with. And so, maybe we could head into a conversation of, the nomination of Harris as vice president.
Certainly, if I could just make the one point in relationship to this, I mean, this is the Democratic Party. It's a party of Wall Street and the military and the intelligence agencies. I had been just looking at some of the people who have now endorsed Biden, and there's a long list of 72 figures within the intelligence agencies, the State Department, the military, who released a letter backing the Biden campaign. And if you go through it and look at, I mean, you know, it's a sort of who's who of individuals who were involved in some of the most horrific crimes. People like John Negroponte, who oversaw the expansion of NSA spying, who was involved in the 1980s as the U.S. ambassador for Honduras in the Contra War against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, involving mass disappearances and deaths. You have Michael Hayden, the former director of the NSA, also involved in the NSA spying, the CIA black site torture program under Bush, people like Chester Crocker, who was a Reagan administration official who oversaw the Reagan administration's accommodating policy towards apartheid South Africa, William Webster, the director of the FBI in the late 70s and 1980s, and then the CIA, who was among those who wrote a letter to Obama demanding that the Obama administration drop even the pretense of investigation into the CIA torture programs after Obama took over from Bush, which of course Obama then did. And one element of the Obama administration was that it covered over and refused to prosecute any of the criminal actions of the Bush administration. Yes, but let's talk about Harris. Harris, of course, the nomination has been presented in the media and the Democratic Party as a historic event in American politics.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the same old line that's promoted by the Democratic Party, the tired line that a person's identity, personal identity, their gender, you know, or their race somehow, you know, equates their political policies as being in line with the working class or the poor. But, you know, this is the continuation of that same lie that's really used to paper over what are very right-wing policies. And both the, you know, the political legacy of Biden and Harris point to the fact that they have been the chief promoters of, you know, law and order policies that have put, you know, thousands of people in prison, have, you know, increased the rate of jailing of felons. I think under Harris's tenure as a California Attorney General, you know, the rate of jailing under felonies increased by over 10%. You know, Harris herself promoted policies to jail parents of truant children. And
there's a video where she can be seen laughing about it. It's really sort of exemplifies her, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, her office argued against a 2014 Supreme Court ruling that mandated that California's prisons were actually cruel and inhumane. It's the largest prison population in the entire world, actually, and definitely in the US. And her office argued that if we were to release 40,000 prisoners, then the prisons would lose their cheap labor source. Primarily, you know, many of the prisoners fight the deadly and devastating California annual fires every year. So, you know, her background, you know, is in the interests of the prison industrial complex, you know, that uses so much of prison labor, which is really entirely criminal. And, you know, her as well as Biden's, you know, many horrific law and order policies, you know, drug laws that saw, you know, large, you know, numbers of people enter into the prison system, particularly in the mid 80s and early 90s. You know, I think Biden actually said to those crime bills, he boasted that we do everything but hang people for jaywalking in these bills. And I think that that's a really important, lesson and legacy of, and sort of look into the future of what the Biden-Harris ticket represents. It represents the escalation of the military, of the police and intelligence agencies really dominating Washington.
Yeah, I think that, well, I think that's very true. And, this, of course, has been a year in which there have been mass demonstrations over police murder after the killing of George Floyd in May, an unprecedented wave of multiracial, multi-ethnic demonstrations throughout the country and indeed around the world, horrified by not only the police violence, but the escalating attacks on democratic rights, the nature of the Trump administration and its fascistic policies, social inequality. But these were very powerful demonstrations. But the line of the Democratic Party was that it was all about race, racial conflict. And they tried to turn it into, well, this isn't an issue of the state, and the state as an instrument of class rule, and the police violence as an expression of that under conditions of, growing social inequality, a homicidal policy in relationship to the pandemic. All of that was covered up. Instead, it was a conflict between white America and Black America, that somehow police violence was an expression of the racism inherent in all white people, and that then the response to that has to be the elevation of, people of African Americans or women into positions of power. I mean, Harris sort of is the outcome of that, and is there something of a, sort of a logic, involved that, the identity politics of the Democratic Party, the focus on race, has concluded in the selection of a vice president, an African American woman who's been so critically involved in the expansion of police powers, and herself, of course, is a former prosecutor. I mean, it sort of expresses the reactionary character of all this.
Absolutely. I mean, there was something, especially tragic about the use of the speaking of the Floyd brothers at the DNC.
Yeah.
Because it, like we say, when we look at the policies of the Democratic Party, and particularly the policies of Biden and Harris, they have, covered over and sought to protect killer cops, abuses of police power. They have, expanded the authorities of the police. I know that, in July, there was a proposal put before the Senate floor to decrease the Pentagon, budget by 10%. It's $750 billion. And even that, Harris said, couldn't be done. So, so much of what animated the protests were, a repulsion of police violence, police killings, and the idea that could be expressed within the Democratic Party or at all expressed within the Biden-Harris ticket is really misleading. And I completely agree that the use of the Democratic Party really has nothing else. What we saw throughout the DNC was that there was no program that's put forward at all to deal with the horrors of the pandemic, to which we describe as, really a trigger event. It's a symptom to the larger cause of capitalism. Conditions were already so dire throughout the US, inequality so high, poverty, malnutrition, lack of access to healthcare, that the pandemic was really, exposing, the horrific conditions that already existed. And so the biggest lie that's put forward, with the, from Ocasio-Cortez to Sanders and the DSA, the biggest lie that's put forward in all of their approvals and promotions of Biden is fundamentally that the Democratic Party can be reformed, the oldest capitalist party in the world, and it's another lie, and is really preparing the basis for continuation of ruthless attacks against the working class.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, no one at the convention referred to the bailout of Wall Street during the midst of this pandemic, which they all supported unanimously, nearly unanimously, Democrats and Republicans in the CARES Act, which sanctioned multi-trillion-dollar bailout of the banks by the Federal Reserve. They turned over all of the money to Wall Street, and now the working class has to pay. And that's why the ruling elite is driving its back to work campaign, the back to school campaign. This has to be paid for. There was a significant statement by one of the leading, or one of the closest advisors to Biden, who said a couple of days ago, he said that, well, basically when we get into office, there's not going to be any money because it's all been spent. So they're not going to actually carry out any significant social reforms. And of course they won't. The state has been bankrupted, cities have been bankrupted throughout the country. They're going to carry out massive austerity. And the Democratic Party, if it's in control, will be implementing that. But that is the Democratic Party, the party of Wall Street, the military, the intelligence agencies, and then mobilizing sections of the upper middle class on the basis of identity politics. I think what your reference to Sanders is worth emphasizing because, again, of course, this election, as in the last one, he attracted a base of support among workers and youth on the grounds of his attack on social inequality, the billionaire class, calls for a political revolution. He is now perhaps the leading surrogate for Biden, made his own appearances at the convention, absolutely uncritical of Biden, calling for the unity of basically everyone, including sections of the Republican Party against Trump. He's playing a central role in seeking to subordinate the opposition of the working class to the Democratic Party. So I think that again is a critical political experience for workers and youth. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. And just, a reminder, this is the same role that Sanders played in 2016. Again, the purpose of of Sanders, the DSA, the pseudo-left is really to corral what is, genuine sentiment, anti-capitalist sentiment, support for socialism, and to really, funnel it back into the Democratic Party. That, Sanders and, Ocasio-Cortez, they are the tame dogs that are able to, are basically, telling, the working class that this is, this is the party that can be reformed. It can be, pushed to the left. But really, these are political operatives whose main role, whose only role, is to ensure that at the end of the day, the two parties, the two candidates of Wall Street, of the military and state intelligence, that they're the candidates that take over the White House. So it's really, these are political operatives.
Yeah, and direct attention away from the growth of the class struggle. I think, that's really the sort of central issue now facing workers and youth. I mean, the situation is really catastrophic. The whole policy of the ruling class has produced a disaster. This is the outcome of the policy that they have implemented, the Back to Work campaign, now the Back to School campaign, the cutting off of benefits. I mean, you have the combination of a massive healthcare catastrophe with an economic and social catastrophe facing millions and millions of people. And there's growing opposition. There's mass opposition among teachers to the efforts to force them back to work. The Trump administration just announced that they're going to declare teachers essential workers in order to force them to stay on the job, even if they're come under contact with someone who has coronavirus, that they can't go into self-quarantine. You have workers on the line who are being told that they can't take off as well, that they have to keep working. Really no safety measures in place, but there's growing opposition. Workers are beginning to form independent rank and file committees and to organize opposition. And the whole sort of character of the sort of bourgeois political system is aimed at sort of directing that into the election of Biden and Harris. Whereas the real source of opposition to the ruling class has to be the development of the class struggle, that the working class has to pursue its own methods, which are the methods of class struggle, and that's really critical in the weeks and months to come.
Yes. No, I mean, the pandemic is really, in every way proving, as far as, rates of infection, of death, it's really, this is a class question. The numbers of it's almost double, the numbers of poor people who are contracting and dying from the disease. And as you say, calling teachers critical infrastructure. I mean, look at who else has been called, essential, from meat packing workers to poultry workers, agricultural workers, healthcare workers, and essentially the position of the ruling class, is just it is what it is. That there will be millions of people infected by the disease, and the recent remarks by Fauci really explain that the promotion of the herd immunity policy by the ruling class is going to result in at least 1 million deaths. And so what we're seeing is really just, an open, class response and class hostility. The working class is being made to suffer and die at the hands of this pandemic, while, as we saw with the CARES Act, trillions are being printed out of thin air and handed over to the banks and corporations. So, what we are putting forward is, a fighting response, that the working class, take matters into its own hands to build rank and file safety committees in their schools and workplaces, and really fight for a policy that ensures that not a single, additional person contracts and dies from this pandemic.
Yeah, and we really urge all of you, if you're not already a member of the Socialist Equality Party, to join. Go to socialism2020.org to fill out the form there and join, and also read our coverage on the World Socialist website. This is really the central question, the building of a socialist leadership to organize the fight of the working class in the United States and around the world. Well, Nerissa, of course, there's a lot more that we could speak about, but we'll have to bring this discussion to an end. Next week, we, of course, have the Republican National Convention, which will be its own horrific display of political reaction, and there'll be a lot to comment on that. Before concluding, I just want to urge all of you as well to go to the World Socialist website and read the essay that has been published by David North on the 80th anniversary of the assassination of Leon Trotsky. It is a very powerful explanation of Trotsky's role, and in particular, his role in the last year of his life and the work that he carried out before being murdered by an agent of the Stalinist GPU in 1940. I would urge everyone to go and read that. The second part of that series has been published today, the first yesterday, and we'll be continuing on to publish that on the World Socialist website. Okay, Nerissa, thanks for joining, and look forward to talking to you